All right, Nick, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Let's begin with how the world knows you professionally and also what wakes you up in the morning. So, if we ask your community and we survey them from their perspective, who's Nick? What is he doing in the world? Why are they following along on your podcast and in your world? And actually, how I got introduced to you was one of my good buddies and a member of Front Row Dads found you, stumbled upon your work, brought you to me. It's like, this man, authentic, real,
It's awesome.
he's up to, love how he's helping people. So talk to me about how the world knows Nick professionally and
Yeah.
what's waking you up.
Man, I'm pretty lucky. I've sold multiple businesses over the last 2 years. And about a year ago, after we sold the last one, I was just like trying to figure out what do I want to do next? Do I want to jump into something else? Do I want to take my time? And it was the first time in years that I hadn't been like maniacally focused on one thing. So all of a sudden I woke up and I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was like, oh, I want to try that. Or what does that taste like? What's this? What's that? And I quickly realized on social media, there's a massive appetite for people to learn. And I felt like after seeing some stuff, I'm like, I think I could contribute here. I think I could actually give some advice on what it's like to buy a business or sell a business or run a business or integrate a new company, et cetera. And so I just started posting about my own experiences buying and selling businesses. Um, I don't really have a goal in mind. I know that I'm getting a lot of energy from it right now because I'm meeting really cool people and I'm learning a lot. I'm very curious and it satiates that part of my personality. And I'm hoping that at some point, opportunity will present itself. But right now, I'm just trying to help people who are interested in entrepreneurship take that first step and
Mm,
figure out what's right for them by sharing my own experiences.
yeah. What was the heart behind getting into this for you? What was the impetus or the draw of small business entrepreneurship and whatever you did
Yeah.
stumble into?
I have a quick question for you. I don't
Yeah.
see my audio like flowing like yours like along the bottom. Is my audio recording? I just want to make sure that like
It is to me.
it is to
I'm
you. Okay,
seeing it.
cool. Um, yeah, it's a good question about entrepreneurship. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, always. And when I got married in 2008, my wife is very conservative. Her father's a CPA, ultra conservative. You go to school, you get a degree, you work at a job, you contribute to your 401k, and you retire 30 years later. And the whole idea of owning or starting a business was completely foreign to her. And so I didn't start anything. I didn't do anything. I was miffed at the time. I thought I knew everything. I thought I could start, own, buy, do whatever necessary. And so I went to school, I got a job, I got lots of experience. And it's only really been in hindsight that I've realized I really needed that corporate experience in order to be successful in the entrepreneur world, much to my chagrin. And I really don't like admitting that to her because who wants to tell their wife that they were right, you know? but but she was right in that sense. Like I had no idea how to negotiate a deal. I had no idea how to do due diligence. I had no idea how to finance. I had no idea how to manage people. I had no idea what my strengths and my weaknesses were. And so I got to fail, and I failed a lot, but I got to fail on other people's dime. And as I gained that experience, it gave me more confidence to go out and do my own thing. And it has ultimately led, me to be successful and be in the place that I am now.
Yeah. What's one of the businesses, an exit, some form of accomplishment, progress, victory that when you think back on the years that have passed you now, what immediately comes to mind? You're like, oh, that was the hardest one, but the best one, or this was the most rewarding for you.
Um, that's a fantastic question. I will say that the home health and hospice that I
Mm.
started and sold is both the most rewarding and the one that got away. I don't know if that makes sense to
Mm.
you.
Tell me more.
Um, I love hospice. Do you know what hospice is?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who don't know, it's death and dying. Anybody who has a terminal diagnosis or a prognosis of 6 months or less, they get hospice services. And we're not trying to cure them. We're just trying to make them comfortable. So they'll have a lot of pain medications. They have a chaplain. They have a music therapist. They have a social worker. Like you're working through not only the physical things, but also the mental and spiritual things of your life as you're kind of coming to the end. So it's a really beautiful thing. And I love it. I think it's an amazing service. I had a son pass away on hospice 8 years ago. My twin sister passed away on hospice 2 years ago with a team that I personally trained. It's like this full circle moment.
Wow.
And so I got to start this business from scratch and build a hospice the way that I wanted to build it. And we did, and we We grew the home health and hospice company to $11 million. I had 4 other partners, and ultimately it was the best thing for the 5 of us to sell the business. They had some other ventures that they were involved with, and it was just like the right time. Nothing terrible. It was all amicable. But that business is still doing really, really well. And it was my baby. So I'm like very, very proud of it. It's now the biggest hospice in the Boise area, or second biggest in the Boise area. But I'm also very bummed that we sold it and I'm no longer a part of it, because it was just such an amazing couple of years to be building something that you're like really passionate about.
In your world, how much does purpose play into whether you choose a business or not? Some people can put purpose totally aside and they're like, this business is profitable, it's good, it's recession proof, I'm in on that. And other people are like, I'm not touching a business that I don't have deep purpose in. And for some people, I think it's a nice combo. And if you can do good and do well, I think that's the best of all the worlds. But
Yeah.
how does that show up for you?
Have you ever read the book like Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yeah.
Yeah, it talks about like the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain, and like one is just your gut reaction to things, like how do you feel about it, and then the other is you rationalizing those feelings. And a lot of times we think we're rational beings because we come up with all the reasons why we should or shouldn't do something, but ultimately it's the justification from your rational brain for those gut reactions that you have. So for me, I know this sounds like stupid or hokey or whatever. I only want to work on things that I am interested in with people that I want to spend time with, right? Really cool things with really cool people.
Yep.
That's, for me, that's the first threshold.
Yep.
If I see an idea, it's like, okay, that's interesting. Is there anybody who's running it that I'd want to work with? Oh yeah, I get along with this person well, or I want to invest in them, or there's like some compelling story. Past that, yeah, then there's those other criteria of what makes economic sense for us to potentially invest in this business. My business partner and I kind of look at it in 4 criteria. Do we have a competitive advantage in one of these 4 areas? Do we have capital advantage, a time advantage, distribution advantage, or a knowledge advantage? Recently, it's been more of the knowledge advantage, but basically, if you have a time advantage, that means you can spend more time on that than anybody else. So if you're getting into a side hustle business and everybody else is treating it as like a 10-hour a week business, but you can afford to do 40 hours a week for whatever reason, you're going to have an advantage there, right?
Mm.
If you're getting into a business that's capital intensive and you have a lot of cash on hand and you're willing to put that investment in, or you have access to a line of credit, or you have investors, that's a capital advantage that you can enter that market. If you have a specific skill set, right, that's your knowledge advantage. Like for me, healthcare, I have a knowledge advantage. So I'm like really interested in investing in healthcare businesses. And then distribution. There's a saying that I love: first time founders focus on product, second time founders focus on distribution. And it's because nobody cares if they don't know. So it doesn't matter how cool your product is. It doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how, sweet it feels or what the aura is. If nobody knows about it, it's not going to get sales. And so do we have a distribution advantage? And that is one of the reasons why I started getting more active on social media, is because I don't know exactly what a presence will do, but I know at some point there's something that I could do to monetize it because I have distribution. And so if it passes one of those 4 tests, we then kind of move on to the next qualifying criteria, which is this something we're interested in? Is it a space that we know? And does it fit like our core thesis? Our core thesis is either we want to be in businesses that are disruptable but accelerated by artificial intelligence, or businesses that are not disruptable by artificial intelligence. So like 2 examples would be the non-disruptable businesses would be tree trimming. We have a tree trimming business, plumbing, HVAC, like home services types of businesses. AI at this point is not going to really disrupt those. On the other end of the spectrum, healthcare. AI is going to disrupt the crap out of healthcare, right? It is going to take the amount of time that a clinician spends documenting, or the administrative pieces that you're like putting together and piecing together. Oh, send us your records from this physician's office so we can then piece it with this physician and we can put it together and the specialist can look at it. It's going to take all of that and allow more time with the patient at the bedside, as opposed to the administrative, spending time on the administrative burdens. So that's an example where I think AI is going to accelerate healthcare. So how can we be kind of on the forefront? And we have an AI healthcare tech company that sort of focuses there. So those are the criterias. I know I said a lot there, but that's kind of how I think of it. First, is it cool? Is it with somebody that I want to work with? Does it meet one of these competitive advantage criterias? And then does it fall within our thesis of AI accelerated, but also disrupted or not disrupted at all by AI.
Tell me how your role in your company aligns with your schedule each week. So as an example, I'm curious as to where does your time and energy go? How much are you in these companies? Are you an investor and you kind of set it and forget it? Do you hand off certain pieces? Are you actively engaged? What does a calendar look like for you now? And I
Yeah.
realize that's probably very different than it looked 3 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, but
Yeah.
right now in your life.
And it's going to be different than it looks, 6 months or a year
I
from now.
bet.
So I have 5 businesses that my partner and I own as part of under our co-founders umbrella. And then I have 4 or 5 other investments that I put money into, but I'm more of a board member. Those ones are probably once a month or once a quarter discussions about strategy, high level things. So very, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours a week, maybe, if you want to assign a time to those personal investments. The businesses that we have currently, I'd say I'm spending a lot of my time on building out the infrastructure. Because I sold a lot of businesses, and Chris and I sort of started this journey together a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. We're in the process of figuring out what do we need to do, like what kind of infrastructure do we need to build in order to scale in the way that we want to scale. And scale for us is not hitting $1 billion. Scale for us is being able to work on interesting projects when we want to work on them. So we just hired a chief of staff. I spent a lot of time with him, kind of building out the design of how we implement these systems across different companies. How do we do payroll? Where are we looking in terms of our accounts payable? How are we tracking leads? What are the systems that we're using in each one of these companies? And then a lot of time on the higher level strategy things of how do we go to market? What's the launch strategy? How do we take advantage of the distribution channels that we've built? And brainstorming with my partner about building out those distribution channels.
What skill do you bring to the table personally that is like, that's your magic touch, man? You can see this better than anybody. Is it asking the right question? Is it figuring out what domino to tip? What's your zone of genius?
Curiosity. I think it's like being willing to ask the questions. I think there's a lot of people who are very smart, but they miss things because they're not willing to ask. And I just don't care if you think I'm stupid, because I'm insecure anyways and think I'm stupid. So I'll just ask the question. Well, how does that work? But I think
That's so great.
I think the willingness to ask is probably my superpower.
Interestingly, when we were talking before we hit record, that, Jamie, who is our podcast producer in a way, director of the show, and he was researching and he had said, hey, Nik asks really great questions. You should ask him, how does he come up with his questions? So take me into the world of curiosity for a moment. Like, how are you structuring your question? Is it just, man, it comes from within, it just rolls off my tongue? Or I have a framework and a model for how I develop these questions? How does is curiosity teachable in this way?
I think that it is. I think that it is. And it sounds so simple that you'll probably roll your eyes at it. But when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I want to understand how things work, I'm not doing anything else. I have ADD. I have ADHD, right? And shiny object syndrome is a real thing, and I get distracted and all that stuff. But when you and I, Jon, are having a conversation, I'm here and I'm locked in and I'm trying to understand what you're saying. And I don't let things go by unsaid. So if you say, oh yeah, and then we take this lead and we send it to the customer and the customer works the lead. There's a million things that could be happening in that space. What do you mean you send the lead? Is it carrier pigeon? Is it an email? Is there a system? Oh, it's a system. Okay, what system are we using? Do they understand the workflows? Are we automating the workflows? If we're automating the workflows, who automated the workflows? How do we figure out the best workflows? Did we just think that up ourselves, or did we have an outside counsel coming in? So like, I just immediately have a bunch of questions because I want to intimately understand what you're saying so that I could teach it back to somebody else if need be. And that's the way that I approach stuff when I'm trying to figure it out. I want to figure it out so well that I can then teach it to somebody else. So my favorite thing to do is go into a company that's having problems and whiteboard it. It's like, all right, cool. What's the process from lead to cash in the bank? What's the process as we fulfill whatever the product is that we're selling to people? And And for that 30 minutes or hour or 2 hours, however long it is, I'm locked in. There may be times later where we're talking and I'm texting on my phone or, answering an email or thinking about something else. But for that period of time, I'm locked in. And I hope that comes across when I'm either on my podcast or having conversations with people. Is like, they're like, oh, Nik is intimately interested in what I'm saying. And that, I think, builds trust. I think it gets people to open up. I think it helps them feel more comfortable about sharing things. So that would be the answer to Jamie's question. Is honestly, I don't prepare a lot of questions for my interviews. I let my curiosity sort of drive it.
That makes sense. And was there somebody in your life that modeled that for you? Or do you remember a moment when you're like, man, I'm going to be really good at this. And then you adopted that identity?
No, I know my mom always encouraged it. I remember being a really young kid and my grandma sat on me because I asked too many questions. In her defense, I asked her why she was fat. And so I was like 4 at the time. She's like, and I don't remember this, but my mom was there, and my mom tells me that I told her, my mom tells me there's no such thing as a dumb question. So from a young age, I had a very supportive mother who would like foster that
Yeah.
part of me. I think it's just innate. I look at it in my oldest son now, who's 10, and he does the same things. And he'll ask me, and then he'll ask me a second iteration of that question or a third iteration of the question. And I find myself getting annoyed because I'm like, I already answered your question, dude. And it'll like hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's how I must come off to people, because I'm trying to get a specific answer, but I'm not getting the right answer. So I'm asking the same question in sort of a different way. So like that was very humbling, just to see my own son sort of inherit that from me. I think for me, it's been innate, and I've had to foster it over time.
I love that you brought family into this, because I wanted to ask, like, which of these business skills that we're talking about, if it's curiosity, asking questions, but even going back to, like, you talk about advantages in business: time, capital, knowledge, and distribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I hear business models like that or frameworks, I wonder which ones transfer well to families.
Hmm.
So let me ask this question kind of as a broad stroke question, which is, of all your business dealings, learnings, successes, models, etc., have there been, or which ones have informed your family life, the way you parent, the way you show up in your marriage or with your kids?
That's a freaking great question, John.
Thank you.
If I had to pick one of those like 4 areas, I would say time. I think time is really important in your family. If I were to pick a book or a philosophy, there's this company. Have you ever heard of the Arbinger Institute?
Arbinger. No.
They have this book called Leadership and Self-Deception.
Mhm.
Um, and that was the first time I read this book, where I have an innate belief that, generally speaking, everybody is good. Yes, I know there's exceptions. There's psychopaths. There's people
I
who
have the
kill
same
other
belief.
people. But I think everybody at their core has goodness to them. Even the people that I've disagreed with or have like not gotten along with, they have a perspective where they feel justified,
Yep.
right? And many times, and the thing that I got out of this book, Leadership and Self-Deception, is like, many times we get into these things called collusions with people. And if you read the book, this is what it talks about, where they act a certain way. And because they act a certain way, I perceive it to be a certain way, which then causes me, based on that perception, right? Oh, my wife asked me, are those pants getting tight? Oh, she must think I'm fat.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. She just called me out on it. And because I perceive it that way, it causes me to act a certain way. Now I'm pissed. Now I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Are your jeans getting tight? Right. Now I act like an idiot and I say something stupid, which then causes her to perceive my actions a certain way and then act in a way that is going to reinforce my belief of the way that she's acting. Right. So it's almost like, it's not almost like, we get into these situations where we create the type of environment that we actually don't want. It's because we're assuming things from different people, right? We're assuming motivations. We think that they're meaning one thing when they don't actually mean that thing, or we lash out when we understand something to be separately. And like when I read that book, it just like, I think you've probably done this too. You read something and it just codifies something you've already believed internally, but it just expressed it in a way that you've never been able to articulate. And that's what that did for me. It was like, oh yeah, everybody's good. You just need to figure out how to get on the same page with them. Like, you just need to figure out what your common motivations are. and move forward. And so for me, like taking that application from business and applying it to my family, yeah, I get irritated with my kids, man. When they jump on me from the top of the couch when I'm just like trying to lay down and watch a show or taking a nap, that freaking pisses me off. But then I like stop and think about it after the adrenaline's got out, and I'm like, oh, I'm probably not giving enough attention to them right now, or like maybe they want to wrestle, or they just want to spend time with their dad. It helps me kind of process these situations and approach it from the perspective of like, okay, what's the root cause here? How do I address that? And how do we move past it without me harboring some ill will or feelings that I shouldn't actually have?
Your kids, you 4 children, ages 10 to
Two.
2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what? Let me take a step back in time. This will feel a little like I'm jumping off the topic,
No,
but
it's good.
I want to take a moment real quick and go back to your childhood since we're talking about you as a parent. What was your relationship like with your dad somewhere between 2 and 10, where your kids are now?
Dude, 2 and 10 is like such a special time where your kids think you're the coolest person in the world. And you just have this feeling where you're like, man, I know in a couple years you're going to realize how big of an idiot I am. But right now, it feels so amazing. Like you just think I know everything and I'm the strongest and the smartest. And yeah, my upbringing was weird. I'm one of 9 kids. My father's an immigrant from the Ukraine who grew up in Brazil. My mother is from Southern California, but they both had, my mom had 2 sons. My dad had a daughter when they came into their relationship. And then my twin sister and I were born, who had severe mental challenges. She was developmentally delayed. And then we adopted my twin cousins because my aunt, unfortunately, was a drug addict and she couldn't take care of them. And so, like, we had this weird blended family. We were exceptionally poor. We were on welfare. And I didn't get a ton of time with my dad. But when I look back on the time from 2 to 10, yeah, I thought my dad was the coolest. I mean, my dad played professional soccer. He grew up in the jungles of Brazil. When he was a kid, the natives captured him and put him in a pot of water, and the mayor had to trade a parakeet in order to get him back. Like he just has these freaking stories that are
It's a real
incredible.
story.
That's a real story. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a real story that he told me. I don't know if it was a real story, but he says when he was 6 years old, he was playing soccer on the edge of the jungle. The natives kidnapped him, and the mayor had to come and negotiate whatever his release, and the terms of the release were like a parakeet and a bow and arrow or something like that. And so I could
I'm
see,
choosing to believe it.
well, I could, as I've gotten older, I'm like, I could see this 6-year-old thinking that that's what happened, right? But maybe he was just trespassing, and the natives were like, "What the frick are you doing?" And they just held him for a little bit, and the mayor had to come, I don't know, broker a peace agreement. But yeah, I just thought my dad was the coolest, man. He was a professional soccer player. He lived overseas. He spoke 4 or 5 different languages. I just thought he was the coolest guy in the world.
Mm. And dad you lost your dad?
Oh, he's still around. Yeah, yeah. My
He's
dad
still
is
around, right?
77. Both my parents live 5 hours from me. Healthy
Heck
as ever.
yeah.
It's freaking
Dude, that's so
great.
great to hear. What's your relationship like now?
My relationship now is great. There was a,
Yeah.
a long period of time where I harbored a lot of ill will towards him. Like after I was 10, we were really poor, and my mom struggled with that. And so they had a really strained relationship for a time. And I took my mom's side, and I'm like, yeah, dad, why can't you get a job? Why can't you make more money? Oh, you're so whatever, fill in the blank. I didn't understand him, right? He's an immigrant. He's foreign. I didn't get it. We always had broken down cars sitting in our driveway. We had a lot of them. We had, a Mercedes, but a Mercedes from 30 years ago, or a BMW with 4 different colored doors. And I was like, what the freak is this? And I get older. I moved to Europe. I live in Europe for a couple of years as a missionary. And I realized if you have 1 car, you're doing really well. You have 2 cars, you're like high status. And I was like, oh, my dad just like associated multiple cars with high
Mm.
status, and he thought BMWs and Mercedes were the way to go. And so, like, as I got older, I just gained a lot more appreciation for him, and he was patient with me. Like all kids, we go through stupid phases, and now he loves it. He's got his grandsons, and we FaceTime at least once a week, and he tells them the same stories he told me when I was a kid, and I love it. It's awesome.
That's really cool. Um, on the topic of parenting, maybe my last question, maybe not, but when it comes to asking your kids questions and being curious, what's your approach look like there? Is it systematic? Do you have 3 questions you ask them every night at dinner? Um, do you use Chat GPT to come up with questions? What does it look like to converse with your kids and be curious with them?
I
And maybe hold on, here's the thing. Maybe what I'm really asking also is the balance of like, and I'll use the bridge of what you just said about your dad about storytelling. Because I think with dads with wisdom, dads who've gone through things, dads who are teachers, dads educators, influencers online, like you, people come to you for counsel. We can get into like, let me teach you something, and it's that directional, like, let me give you the words of wisdom from dad. And the other one is just to remain curious about who they are, what they think, what their perspective is. Talk to me a little bit about your world as a dad and questions and teaching and all of that.
Man, my oldest is 10, so this may change over the next 10 years, but my approach and philosophy right now is I don't have any structured questions. I tried that for a period of time, but I don't know. I couldn't keep it up. We do talk every night. We have dinner, like, hey, how was your day? What did you do? Those types of things. But for me, I really try to get them to think about what they're saying and what they're doing. Even if they ask me a question, I try to get them to think about what the answer might be. So I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, my son comes to me and he goes, oh, let me preface this by saying, I think kids come to you with statements of fact disguised as questions. And he comes to me and he goes, Dad, did you know Joe Biden is evil? I'm going to get political here, so I'm sorry, you may have to cut this. He's like, did you know Joe Biden is evil? And I'm like, yeah, tell me about that. It's like, yeah, well, he wants inflation to happen and he wants the country to go, really bad. And he wants all these bad things. And then he ends it by saying like, is that true? And I was not going to get into like this, policy debate with them. I'm like, well, but what we did talk about was, well, son, there's a thing called politics. And there's these two groups of people, mainly in the United States, where we have conservatives and we have Democrats, and they compete every year to get their priorities pushed through. So, but let me ask you a question, because I believe everybody is inherently good. Why would Joe Biden want inflation? Well, because he wants bad things for America. Do you think he really wants bad things for America? So we talked about that for a bit, right? I personally don't think he wants bad things for America. I disagree with him on many things. He seems to be somebody who wants, I may not agree with what he wants, but he thinks he's putting those things forward to further the country, right? And so I'm talking to my son, I'm like, he thinks these things will be helpful. Why would he think those things are helpful? Well, there's kind of two schools of thought. You can have a big government to take care of you every day, or you can have the government kind of stay out of your life and let you make your own decisions. Which one do you think sounds more appealing? And so we just like start having this conversation about things, because I don't want to just sit him down and be like, yeah, that guy's a piece of crap. You want to hear what he said in a private conversation, or do you want to hear what legislation he just passed? Because I think that that's coloring him to an opinion that I don't care so much about the opinion. I want him to think for himself and to really think through, like, does that make sense? Why would somebody want those things? And that's the way I approach it with them growing up, is like, if they come to me with something and they're asking me the question, it's like, oh, that's a good question. Let's figure it out together. And let's try to draw on some of these principles that you already know to be true to figure out an answer to this question. So I'm sorry if I triggered anybody, but I just think that that's important as a parent. Like, your job is to not spoon feed them the information. Your job is to teach them how to think critically so they can make the right choices when you're not around.
Nik, I love that, man. That's that last couple of minutes is pure gold, dude. I also like learning that way. I like learning by you telling me the actual story. Sometimes I get lost in theory. I think you talk to your kids like this, and like, first do this, and second do this, and third do this. It's like, tell me about the conversation you had with your son. Tell me what it sounded like. And if you could make it a little humorous, and a little real, that would also be really great for me. But that's how I want to learn. And so thank you for teaching us in that way. It really gets me thinking about my conversations with my kids. I think that'll have a big impact. And something just hit me as we're talking here, and that is that this is really what we're having a conversation. It feels like to me, and I'm always looking for the thread, it feels like how to think. You just said it, right? We talked in the beginning about how you think about investing in deals: time, capital, knowledge, distribution. We talk about, um, you know, thinking fast and slow,
Yeah.
right? And now we're talking about how our kids think and how we're approaching problems, which is, to me, the best. That is maybe the most important skill, is just, how do I approach this thing?
Yeah.
How do am I bringing my core values to the table? Am I bringing some type of a model that I've been taught to help me filter these decisions?
Yeah.
Right? Both
That's,
as parents and in my marriage and my business, like, yeah, how do I think about this? What is my approach to this?
yeah,
Is
that's
there
really
something else
interesting.
on this topic, Nik, that we could talk about that I don't know enough about you and your heart and your world to know what question to ask, but I almost want to just like open my hands up real wide and go, dude, tell me more about how to think. Tell me more about how we should think
Oh,
about
yeah.
our marriage, our kids, ourselves.
That's funny. We got to keep this down. I don't want my wife busting in and like telling you all the crappy stuff. So let's be careful. Um, I, I would say, like, to me, one of the most important things is to know yourself. And I think it's really hard to make decisions in your life without knowing what's most important to you. And I'll give you an example. I think a lot of people want to get into business, but they don't really know why, or they don't really know what they should be aiming for. Some people want freedom. Some people will just want to be really, really rich. Some people want the prestige of being a business owner. Some people just want other people to leave them alone and have control. But if you don't know like what you want and why you want it, then you make decisions that are counterproductive to happiness in your life. Like if I am somebody who is introverted, I hate people. I don't like people, but I'm really talented and I'm really skilled at software engineering. Why would I go buy a business doing $5 million a year with 100 employees that requires people management? Why would I do that? I wouldn't do that, right? But if I haven't like sat down and really acknowledged and been humble enough to say like, yeah, I don't like people. I don't want to manage anybody. That sounds terrible. You might make some really bad decisions because you think, oh, this business is big. It's making a lot of money. I can be successful. People are going to look at me and think that I'm really cool. We make really, really poor decisions. But if that same person recognizes, okay, I'm really, really good at software development. I hate people. What can I do? All of a sudden, oh, there's an agency. I can just launch a company and do contract work. I can go out to some contacts that I have and find business that way, and I can just create a lifestyle business where I'm making 250, 350 a year, and I don't have to interact with anybody, and I can build things the way that I want to build them. All of a sudden, they can focus their energy on the things that are going to bring them the most satisfaction and joy in their life, and not on something that is really a mirage, what they think is going to make them happy, what they think is going to make them successful. So for me, it like comes back to understanding who you are, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then being okay with that. Because like that confidence is attractive, but it also helps you make better decisions in life that allow you to, spend more time with your kids and enjoy more of your life rather than doing things that you thought your mom wanted you to do or your dad wanted you to do or society thinks that you should be doing. Go and do this. I've always just admired people who, even if they get into trouble, like they just did what they wanted to do and they weren't ashamed of, like, even Donald Trump to a certain extent, right? Like, yeah, I don't really want my kids looking up to that guy. He says a lot of weird stuff to people, but at the same time, I'm like, that guy lives his life. He says I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and he does it unashamedly. It seems like he has a good relationship with his kids. It seems like he really loves his family and his granddaughter. Like there are things there that it's not as black and white as like, oh, this person's all good or this person's all evil. But I think it comes from this place of like really knowing who you are and going after the things that you know are going to bring you the most satisfaction.
What have you learned about yourself in the last year that's been particularly enjoyable or shocking to know about Nik?
Enjoyable is I rediscovered that I love creating. I love like the brainstorming, the ideation. I was a musician for a long time. I thought I was going to be a professional musician and gave that up. And now with like,
Is that right?
yeah,
That
Uh,
what'd you
play
play?
guitar,
Or what?
singer songwriter.
Yeah, nice.
Um, and
Can I find your music online?
there's probably a couple YouTube videos or something. But
Yeah, let's
yeah.
go.
Um, but like I kind of forgotten that, and I didn't really keep it up because it was kind of painful for me to not be doing that stuff. But recently with social media and creating content, I'm like, gosh, I forgot how much I just love creating. So that's one thing I would say has been a fun thing to kind of rediscover. At the same time, I've discovered I have a temper, man. Like I didn't realize it. And there's something about having more free time with, like, I've sold these businesses, and so I have more free time with my kids. And after like an hour, if my wife's like, "Hey, can I go to whatever, play tennis or get a massage or something?" Oh yeah, sure, I'll take care of the kids. After like an hour or two, I'm like, just find myself being way less patient and like irritated about certain things. And so I've been trying to work on that, where I'm present more and not just, distracting myself with my phone. I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead and watch Netflix and I'll scroll Twitter or Instagram. That was kind of like a rude awakening, because I think of myself as a loving father and I really love my kids. I spend a lot of time with them. But you start going to like thinking about what it's like to be a stay-at-home mom, or the parent who's raising these kids. And all of us, like, really quickly, I just realized I don't think I could do it. I really don't think I could be the primary parent raising kids. And that was a very weird kind of reality check for me.
Thank you for that openness. That's also something Jamie said about you, was very authentic and vulnerable. So I appreciate that. That
Yeah.
shines through in those moments. Talk to me a little bit about what happens for you when you discover that. So you're like, I have a little bit of a temper, and then what?
Deny, deny, deny.
Right. Okay, good. I was
Counter.
hoping that's where you were going to go, because I'm doubling down on that strategy this year.
Well, the real trick is the next step. The first three steps are deny, deny, deny. Third step is counter accuse.
Yeah,
Then
that's
I
right.
accuse my wife of it, and then I deny again.
Yep.
No, that dude, that is like the $1,000,000 question. I one of the things I've been trying to do is put my phone away for like a certain period of time. I pride myself on being responsive. Like if you text me or send me a message, I try to be responsive. But it's like, all right, between 5 and 8, I'm gonna try to put my phone away, do not disturb, and I'm gonna be with my kids. And dude, that is so uncomfortable. I don't know if you've ever. I'm sure you have. You've done hard things. Anytime you've done something hard that you haven't been doing, you're building a new muscle. When you're building a new routine or a new habit, the first couple weeks are just hard, right? Because it's so much easier to revert back to what you were doing. And yeah, like I find myself feeling phantom buzzes in my pocket. I'm like, oh, someone just texted me. Oh, wait a second. I don't even have my phone on me. How could they be texting me? But you have to, for me, it's like I have to push through that. And the way that I push through that is by co-opting my wife and telling her like, hey, I'm trying to work on this. Can you help me? Like, just remind me, make sure that I'm whatever, staying on track. And the thing about spouses is they love telling you when you're wrong. So like they will help you achieve those goals if you're going off track. Like she's very quick to be like, oh, why are you looking at your phone? Hey. So like, yeah, for me, that's it. Like being humble enough to realize, okay, it's an issue. What can I do about it to fix it?
Yeah. I heard somebody say, and I'm sure many people have said this, but it came to me this past year through various channels, and that is that anger means something has to change. So notice when I was like getting upset, now my model or my framework is I get upset. I don't always handle myself or react or respond energetically or verbally or whatever way immediately. I still don't. But I'm now getting the awareness that anger means something in my life has to change. That's its lesson for me. Now, it doesn't mean that the person even has to change, right? The other person.
Yeah.
It likely means I need to change. It likely means there's some type of boundary that I'm not honoring, communicating, reacting to in a way that serves me ultimately. And it's like the notice I'm getting is something's got to change here.
So
So
what
it
do you
might
do?
be, well, what I'm attempting to, so I would have answered the question. Let me back up for a second and say, I would have answered very similarly to you, Nik, that, and people know this who've been listening to this show or in my community, in the Front Row Dad community, which is now like going into its 8th year. And, people would have heard me say multiple times over the last several years that emotional intelligence, my temper, my anger, is the thing I'm working on the most. I'm like, I also am a very loving person and I'm a nice human, genuinely in my heart. Like if you crawled inside, you'd be like, oh, it's nice in here. Like it's a good dude, like genuinely. But I also lose my shit and I get angry, and it's the thing that I have the most shame around, because again, like loving people so much and being what I think is a really good person, I'm like, why do I even care that much about this thing? Why does that bother me so much? And then I carry shame about that. Like it shouldn't bother me so much. I shouldn't be that upset. But when I then started looking at it like, what is this trying to tell me? Well, all sorts of answers have emerged over the years. One of which, by the way, when I start really looking at what's going on, dude, I have a long list. It's probably 100 things. But like, here's one example is I took a look at my health. My inflammation markers in my body are crazy. So at a core level, fundamentally, I'm not healthy, as healthy as I could be. And that's affecting my spirit, my mood, my patience, like my health. You travel out further down that road, dude, we found mold in our home. Then you start looking into mold and you're like, dude, that can affect children's behavior and everybody's. They call that the home wrecker, because people start fighting because they have mental challenges as a result of mold in their home.
That's the cause of your inflammation?
So we think we're in the middle of this right now, by the way. I'm working with 3 very good doctors to diagnose like what's going on. And there are probably a handful of things that it could be, right? Of what's causing the inflammation. And I don't mean to derail us.
No, I love this.
You're asking a great question now, getting a chance to experience your curiosity. And here's my reality. And we could we could do a 3-hour show on this, because this is very big in my life right now. And there's a lot to bring into focus here. But, let me think what's of value to everybody as I'm answering this. So I guess the point is, let me just track my own line of thinking. The anger gets me to figure out what's going on. What's going on has led me to explore my health. Like, how am I as a person?
Yeah.
That has led me to all sorts of decisions that were affecting, so that is what needed to change. What needed to change was my health, right? And so I invested in the right doctors. We're doing the right tests, and we're evaluating it right now. The conversation amongst my friends are parasites, mold, heavy metals. I'm not even joking. By the way, if you crawled into my band meeting, which is our small group, we call it our band in Front Row Dad, Justin Donald, Hal Elrod, Dane Espegard, you would have heard us sitting around the table talking about mold. Our friend Mike Dillard, who lives here in Austin, battled massive mold problems.
Oh my God.
Friend Jenna battled massive mold problems, and it just goes on. But mold, parasites, all this could be the cause of the inflammation, right?
Well, I had a very similar, not mold, but about a year ago, I was just sick. Here's TMI. I was having diarrhea like multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And it lasted for a month.
Yeah.
And I was tired. I didn't have energy. I was lethargic. I didn't want to be around my kids. And I was like, am I depressed? Like, what is going on? So I finally go to the doctors, and turns out I had Giardia.
Yeah.
And I was worried, because I was worried they're going to be like, we don't know. Why don't you cut wheat from your diet? Oh, why don't you try? You know what I mean? Like, that would have been, I think, even worse. But I go to a doctor, I get a diagnosis, I get cured of it, and I'm feeling much better. I think there are like times in your life too where we like to be strong and think, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to solve this problem, but you need external help to do that.
What was the cure for you?
I don't know, some like pill that I took.
Antibiotics.
That killed the parasite. But 8 years ago, after our son passed away, my wife looked at me and she was like, you're a jerk right now. You need to go see somebody. And so I started going to see a therapist. They prescribed an antidepressant. And my entire life up until that point, I'd always thought like, okay, placebo effect. Like, who needs an antidepressant? Who needs to go see a therapist? Like, just man up, do what you need to do, like, and get through it. But that was a situation where I needed external help. Like, I needed something, some type of intervention to come in and help me through things. Like, it's this, the solution isn't always just power through it or be a man or be stronger than you were yesterday, because
Yeah.
you're not there. And
Most of the time, that's actually not been my answer. I can do that. I can point to times in my life when I completely sucked it up. I completely put all, everything aside and got focused. Jamie Bogger, again, the guy who connected us, found you.
Okay.
He and I ran an ultra marathon to start a charity 20 years ago called Front Row Foundation. He comes to me and he's like, we're going to run a 53-mile marathon in 16 weeks. So from couch to ultra, basically. And I put aside all logical, reasonable health like of my body and muscled my way through that. Right? It was not healthy. It was not healthy.
Right.
But truly, like, finding out for myself what is a healthy approach. That's, who do I need support with? What does need to change? I mean, again, that's what just came up, is like, when I'm angry and I go back and I look at the core, dude, my wife and I basically took a 2.5-month break recently from each other. 2.5 months. We've been married for 17 years. We were in the darkest season we've ever been in our marriage. And I went and traveled for 4 weeks. I took one of my kids one-on-one to Hawaii for a week. I took the other kid to California for a week. I went to an Ayurvedic healing clinic in Asheville for a week. I took a week off by myself. And then Tatiana went to Russia for 5 weeks with our youngest son. Dang. 2.5 months basically of time apart.
Yeah.
During the time that I was here, Nik, at my home here in Austin, dude, every day I woke up, I took 2 weeks off of work. And every day when I woke up, I did 3 to 5 hours of anything I wanted to do. I was just messing around with the house. I'm like, oh, that lock has been in a box by the door for 3 months. Every time I walk by the door, I'm like, fuck that lock. I got to put that lock up. Damn it, And eventually I put the lock up. And then I was like, oh man, that table's been bothering me. It's like, energetically, I look at it and it bothers me. And then when I open my pantry, it bothers me. And my coat closet pisses me off. I finally started looking at my house. I'm like, no wonder you're irritated, Jon. Your environment is bothering you. And every day you just suck it up. You're like, I got work to do. That's my, that coat closet is not my lead domino. I'm really good at lead dominoes. I'm really good at knowing the leverage points of my business. And I'm like, I don't do coat closets anymore. I could outsource that. I could hire somebody, but my pay rate's too high for me to be organizing a coat closet. Dude, and truly, like, what needed to change for me was something I was completely glossing over and unaware of. It's like, my physical environment, my home environment had become toxic emotionally to me.
Wow.
And I was taking it out on my wife and I was taking it out on my kids. But 2 weeks of me just being able to do whatever I want around the house, I felt differently, fundamentally felt differently. I started sleeping better at night, and I'm not an advocate for ignoring the important things in business and going and, like, trying to, like, reorganize your garage as a procrastination tool. But I'm a huge fan of, like, if energetically something's stuck and blocked, your space, your ecosystem is not healthy for you, that's going to cause me to be short-tempered with my kids. So I didn't need a better approach with my kids. I needed a break, and I needed to get my living situation. I needed to get my emotional body tended to, and I needed enough space and quiet to figure that out. Now I've got so much more patience for when my kid does jump on me.
Are you like a naturally cleanly person?
Yes.
And by that, I mean, like, you're organized, your room is clean, your stuff is always in a good place.
Yes.
You can tell me no comment. What's your wife like?
Like, messy shit everywhere.
What is the deal with that, man? Like, why? I'm your wife. I'm your wife, right? And, like, my wife is you. How do these people, like, find each other? It's like they're always just in pairs.
Yes.
It's so crazy to me.
Dude, I could tell you, I'm not going to tell you right now because I'm doing a lot of talking and I want you to be the one doing a lot of talking. But there is something beautiful, I will say, is kind of like concluding this comment, which is my wife likes to put these little altars everywhere and gather these artifacts. And I used to look at them as such an annoyance to my life, like clutter. And now I see it as this beautiful collection of artifacts. and my reframing of my thinking is what's allowed me to change how I feel. So what needed to change was my perspective in that case, not her.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
to your comments about your house, I think one of the I'm very messy. My wife, she's not from Germany, but her grandma's from Germany, and I always make fun of her. My wife's like, "The trains will run on time, or the trains will not run at all." She's just like, but like I notice mentally and emotionally for myself when I come home and the house is clean, I feel way different than when I come home and the house isn't clean.
mm,
Or if we have a lot of people who come over and we're, hosting, entertaining after they leave, if I leave the dishes to the next day, or if I do them that night, I feel different. Like there's just a different level of feeling. If my lawn is mowed, and I do our lawn, if my lawn is mowed versus if it's long and shaggy, I notice the difference. I didn't notice that in myself until I got married to my wife, and I started like having these moments of like, why am I stressed? Oh,
mm.
and my wife would be like, well, it's because the house is a mess. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a really good point. And so now I could outsource my yard easily, but I find it like therapeutic for me to go out
Definitely.
and I'm like spending time away from my phone and I'm thinking and I'm processing. And it's just like a great experience for me to go out and take care of the yard. I feel good about it after I'm done. So like I'm resonating with what you're saying. I think it's really important that you're taking care of all aspects of your life and not letting them sort of be sacrificed for something that you think is the greater good. And just because you have money to pay for it, like, oh yeah, I could take care of that somewhere else. That isn't necessarily always the solution to things.
And going back to what you said, a lot of this is just knowing yourself.
Yeah.
Because I also have all these ideas popping in my head that are like, it should be this way, Jon, because that's what you read in a book.
Right.
And versus, well, what actually works for you? I mentioned his name a moment ago, Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning. And it's like, that's how he would say you should start your morning, right? With these principles of silence, affirmation, visualization, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But dude, for me, the last 3 weeks, the healthiest way for me to start my morning was like I'd wake up at 4:30, 5 a.m. I'd walk to the garage. I'd organize the workbench. I would, by 6 a.m., I was planting and gardening. Should I hire a landscaper and find another way to build a part of my business or right? Like,
Right.
yeah, if numbers were all that mattered, but if I'm really knowing myself and what the full human experience of Jon Vroman is, like, dude, he wants to go put a plant in the ground and like look at that and be like, look what I did. Like I
Totally.
did that.
Yeah. And like the books or the talks that we hear people give, those are ways maybe that they have found to be the most useful for themselves
For sure.
to get
For
them into
sure.
their flow state or to get them satisfaction. And that's great. But you should try it out, and it might not be for you. Spoiler alert, cold plunging and doing a sauna every day is not for everybody. And that's okay. like you just got to figure out, okay,
Yeah,
what
that's right.
works for you. And there's a lot
100%.
of, I think you can only get to that place when you've done the work and are okay with yourself. I think there's a lot of insecurity that drives like someone searching for the next thing. Well, I got a gratitude journal every morning, or I got to, do my affirmations, or you should, if it works for you, you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but you also shouldn't just lean into it because you haven't
That's right.
figured it out for yourself.
Know what works,
Yeah.
experiment. Feels like a great place to land the plane right here. It feels like a complete thought. I love this conversation, and I want to ask you one last question, maybe two. But the question is this: our tagline is "Family men with businesses, not businessmen with families." That's who we are in one sentence.
I love that.
And that was born because I used to be a businessman who happened to have a family, and I got called up into being a man with different priorities. And interestingly, my business has still grown, with my priorities in order. I used to put business events on the calendar first. Now I put family events on the calendar first. So
Same.
life has changed. My bio used to read business, business, business. By the way, he's a dad. Now it reads he's a dad and husband and happens to do these businesses on the side. From your perspective, Nik, for any man out there wanting to be more of or to begin the journey into being a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family, what advice do you have for this person as we wrap the show?
So I was a missionary for my church for 2 years, and we went and knocked doors in Hungary and got rejected all the time. But one of the cool lessons that we used to teach, we called it an object lesson, was we'd have this glass jar, and outside of the jar there would be sand and some big rocks. Okay. And so the sand would be everything else in your life that you need to do. You need to go to the store. You need to, I don't know, do a new initiative at work, or you need to go to the gym, all the stuff of life. And the rocks, there's like 3, 4, 5 of them, would be like your biggest priorities: God, family, maybe you have a very special relationship outside of your family that you want to maintain, like something like that. But there's only 3 or 4 of them that are the most important things in your life. And what we would do is we would take the sand first and we'd fill up the jar, and the jar would be full. And we'd say, all right, well, how do we get the rocks in here? It doesn't work, right? Like if you're prioritizing all the other stuff in life, the things that should be the most important to you don't fit in. But many times we think, well, we have to put the sand in first. We got to do all the other stuff first, and then we'll take care of the rocks. And then you empty the jar out and you put the rocks in first, and you find that the sand fills in around the rocks. And it's a really, really cool object lesson. Again, it was like from this religious context, but I've applied it to my life as well. I would say for anybody struggling with that, you will find more meaning in your life. You will find more time in your life when you identify the things that are most important to you and you make them the priority. Somehow everything else falls into place. Somehow you hit the nail on the head. You made the shift, and yet you're still growing. Your business is still doing really well. And it's because you made certain things a priority. If you lock those things in, everything else falls into place. And I know that sounds hokey, but if you try it, I promise it will happen for you like it's happened for men for thousands of years once they've truly realized what's most important in their lives.
Brother, thank you for the conversation today. Really enjoyed getting to know you. I hope there's more for us in the future, but if there isn't, this has been awesome. And if people want to continue to learn with you, can you give a small pitch to your podcast? What are you trying to accomplish there? Who is it for? Tell us about that.
I have a podcast. It's geared for entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs who are curious how other businesses work. I worked for a long time in healthcare, and I thought, oh, this is how all businesses work. And all of a sudden, over the last couple of years, I've realized there's a lot more out there. There's SaaS companies, there are manufacturing companies, there's healthcare companies. They all work differently. And I get entrepreneurs to come on and open up about their businesses, like really tell me how much money do they make? What's their customer acquisition cost? What's their lifetime value? Like nitty gritty questions, not the high level, what do you think of the macro environment and how do you manage people? So if you like learning specifics about businesses, it's a really cool podcast to listen to.
Nik, thanks for being here. I wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you.
I'm walking away with about 12 questions that I'd love to ask you that we didn't get time for today. But as usual, everything was perfect, and the conversation was perfect. The exploration was perfect. It wasn't forced. There was great value. I'm looking at a page of notes right here. And I'm super grateful for this conversation. So
thank you.
Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No, man, this was great. I learned a ton about myself. So thanks for asking the questions.
Yeah. Thanks, brother. All right. Well, I look forward to more. And until then, man, take care.
Same. Appreciate you.